Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Nittany Lion Sports Report. It's Bob Long, and alongside me is Tyler Gehlhaus. And today, yes, Penn State off the Schneid. Yes, that's how you say and spell Schneid. 1-5, the Nittany Lions, Tyler, has to feel good as a member of the staff here at Bob Long Sports, and of course, as a fan as well. Someone that came up watching the program. Had to be good to see Penn State get some things right on Saturday on the road at Michigan. And, of course, it's this year that they go to the Big House and get a win.
Yeah, of course, the empty Big House that it was. Needless to say, I mean, anytime you can beat Michigan, it's a good thing. Recruiting purposes, superiority really in the conference behind Ohio State, at least in the East, maybe not this year with Indiana. But historically, it's first time that they went in there and won in the Big House under James Franklin. You would have told me at the beginning of the season that any of this was going to happen 0-5, and then the first win would be at Michigan. I'd call you crazy, but 2020 continues to roll on as we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, they continue to roll on. We see a lot of changes in the offensive personnel. We talked a lot about the quarterback. We'll get to that. But let's start at running back. Keyvone Lee came in, 22 rushes, over 100 yards, had a tremendous game running the football. Really that back that can the pace car, if you will, right, Tyler? The guy that can make some hay in between the tackles, break a few tackles, but really more about vision, decisiveness, making the right decision running in between those tackles. And has to be noted, Devin Ford was not there because of a death in the family. So we obviously give our condolences to Devin Ford and his family. We weren't sure, even coming into the game, whether or not there was a family emergency, whether Ford was going to be ready based upon the injury suffered the week before. But nonetheless, any way you slice it, the running back room looks different for the rest of this year and going into next year with the job that Keyvone Lee has done.
Yeah, almost really we're looking at almost the same thing as last year, Bob, when, it was Ricky Schneid, and then, Noah Cain behind him as a freshman, and Journey Brown was down as like the fourth stringer at the start of last season. And now here we are again with a fourth or a fifth stringer at the beginning of the season. All of a sudden, he's the number one guy for you. Keyvone Lee is, and that's why you recruit the position. Penn State has recruited it as well as arguably anybody in the country, and it's paying off. I mean, another thing, we keep talking about 2020. You would have told me that Keyvone Lee would be the number one running back in week 6. I would have told you you're crazy. I mean, he was likely a redshirt candidate all the way. Wasn't on campus in the spring. Not that many people obviously got a leg up in spring practice because of the virus, but he was a guy that was a red shirt all the way. Didn't play last year, his senior year of high school football. There was he transferred high schools and was ineligible or something, from Florida, the St. Petersburg area in Florida, Clearwater area. And here he is really making a name for himself. And it's really good to see. And I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the season. I'm excited to see what he can do a year under Dwight Galt in the strength and conditioning program, because he's really just scratching the surface. Big guy, 6 foot, 230, big running back. He can get bigger and faster, which is scary. But back to his game on Saturday, I thought, you hit the nail right on the head, Bob, with some of those plays were like veteran running back moves where there was nothing in the hole that he was trying to hit, and he bounced it out to the outside and got, 15 to 20 yards and first downs to keep the clock going and seal the deal for the victory. It was very impressive day on the ground for Lee.
Yeah, Lee, I mean, in some ways more of, and he's not Noah Cain, of course, but a little bit of a different back than what Devin Ford brings you. And perhaps Devin Ford is more effective in a limited role, more of a change-up back type. And so this may help both of those backs. You talked about Lee and, coming from the state of Florida, the fact that Penn State has this depth to essentially lose from the offseason when you had the transfer to Old Dominion from Ricky Schneid,
right?
Journey Brown medically retiring, Noah Cain hurt on the first play, and now you're down to 4, 5, 6 in the depth chart. The fact that you still have guys able to come out and make plays at a high college level, and again, you talked about Lee coming from Florida. That's a J1 Sider product, and that's the fact that you brought a guy into this running back room who not only is a great running backs coach, but is an excellent recruiter. And yes, they took advantage of the success that Miles Sanders and Saquon Barkley before him had, and what they've been able to do at the professional level. But Tyler, I mean, this has to give you some confidence in an otherwise depleted year at the position.
It really does give me confidence, and I think not that my confidence really matters. It's more about the team's confidence. But into these last 2 games, I feel like, not long ago, really a week ago, we were talking, wow, 0-8's a real possibility. Sure, 1-7 still is, but I find it hard to believe. I'd be shocked, honestly, at this point. I know we're changing course, but if they should beat Rutgers and then Michigan State. And I don't know about that 9th game, but confidence is growing with the running back room. I saw a little bit more of a confident Sean Clifford out there. I felt like a lot of players on that team are gaining confidence right now. Obviously too late for this season, but translating to next season is always a good thing.
Well, let's talk about the quarterback for just a second here, because we've covered it probably more than we've needed to. We were harsh when we needed to be. But now let's give Sean Clifford a little bit of credit. This is a different performance from him. They did not turn the football over. They won the turnover battle. And that's the biggest thing. And certainly Sean Clifford has been inaccurate. He wasn't completely accurate on Saturday. He was 17 for 28. Didn't ask him to do a ton, only a shade over 150 yards passing. But the key, Tyler, is where you miss the football. Are your misses into the ground, or are your misses over the middle, or are your misses high and out of bounds, right? And so you can't miss over the middle. You saw it in that Nebraska game, the pick that he threw. You can't fumble the football. You also saw that in the Nebraska game. That led to his benching, Will Levis coming on and then getting a start in that ensuing game. You found out pretty quickly, if you're a Penn State fan, that with a week to prepare for Will Levis, most defenses will come up with that. You're left thinking, boy, it's time to go back to Sean Clifford, and that's all that you have. And again, we're not talking about the college football playoff, as you mentioned. We're not talking about a Big Ten football title. However, a disciplined Sean Clifford, not being asked to do too much and not turning the football over, does give you an opportunity, let's face it, in a very down Big Ten conference, to win a lot of football games. And we can talk about next year and the transfer portal in a month. But for right now, Sean Clifford, I believe, with a fire under his rear end and the understanding of how important turnovers and preventing them is, he's going to give you the opportunity to win these next 2 games and then the crossover +1.
Yeah, and looking at the box score here, it looks like Penn State, Clifford threw it 28 times. Somebody threw it once. I'm guessing maybe it was Levis. I'm not sure why it's not recorded. That's kind of weird. But so 29 passes compared to 50 rush attempts. Sean Clifford had 9 of those rush attempts, whether or not a lot of them were designed, as we saw throughout the game. One of them, which was a nice touchdown run by Clifford. But that's the kind of recipe for winning. I think that, that's the blueprint right there, is once they got the ground game going, and that was one of the first times this year they were actually able to get the ground game going. And they were playing ahead. They didn't have the third and longs. It was, second manageable, third manageable. And that's the key. Sean Clifford, if he doesn't make turnovers and he can just manage the game, that's really what Penn State needs him to do, and that's what he did on Saturday. And it was a good recipe. Obviously, they got their first win, and let's see if they can build on it here moving forward with 2 very winnable games and likely a third winnable game.
Yeah, positives, right? I mean, we're talking about positives. A quarterback playing much better than he has been. You're talking about a running back that was supposed to be a redshirt and contributing in a 100-plus yard rushing game in a Big Ten football game against a Michigan team, at least a program of significance. Maybe this particular iteration of Michigan, not very good. Theo Johnson, Brenton Strange getting a ton of snaps. Yes, you don't want to lose Pat Freiermuth for the season, and more importantly, you hope for the best for Pat Freiermuth as he gets ready for the draft and pursues that next stage of his career. But this tight end room is stacked, and I think that Theo Johnson has shown himself to be a very able-bodied tight end. And clearly, the stars coming in reflect that. But again, look at a guy like Zach Kuntz. The stars reflected that, and he wasn't ready to come right away and play. So you're excited about what you see out of Theo Johnson, and Brenton Strange, an excellent run blocker.
Yeah, I was very excited to see both of them out there. I mean, Theo Johnson doesn't look like a redshirt freshman at all. I mean, he's massive. You know, some people have actually said that he is going to be the top tight end draft prospect Penn State has had in recent years. You know, that's pretty elite company with Gesicki and Freiermuth, right? But, you know, the youth movement is starting to show a little bit. There were 5 redshirt or true freshmen that started on offense this week. Caeden Wallace, the right tackle, who has been very good this year. Brenton Strange, another redshirt freshman, tight end. Theo Johnson, another tight end that started. They started with, I guess, what is that, the 22 personnel, 2 tight ends and 2 running backs, or
yep,
2 tight ends,
right.
2 wide receivers.
It's running back, tight end.
Okay, well, I think they had 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers start, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if my numbers are adding up, but then they also have
it was probably 12 personnel then. 1 running back, 2 tight end. Yeah.
12 personnel, right. And then they had Keyvone Lee, obviously you mentioned him, and then Parker Washington, another freshman who had an unbelievable game, who has had a very, very good year, very consistent, you know, makes plays out there. And you know, you talk about the tight end group this year, next year being fine, and they'll be more than fine. You know, you mentioned Zach Kuntz, who's could be 3rd on the depth chart come next year, who, you know, is the oldest guy in the room. So, but wide receiver is another group that I have really high hopes for right now. They've really produced this year and have been like the missing weak link for the last couple of years on the offensive side of the ball. And they have guys there that are really playing well too. So still, I think, you know, these next couple games, as long as they can continue to figure out the quarterback, you know, they have the pieces there for next year and the talent to be pretty good next year.
Yeah, we all have our biases about things. One of my bias is if you're recruiting 6'1" cornerbacks, you should probably be recruiting 6'1" or taller wide receivers. And they seem to have gone in opposite directions. The Christian Campbells of the group with the cornerback, and even the more recent guys with the size. Of course, Joey Porter Jr. with that size. And then at the wide receiver position, you've gone with the smaller, good route runner, explosive KJ Hamler types, Parker Washington in some regards as well. And I just that's a bias of mine. We can move on from there. I would like to see a larger and stronger bodied wide receiver.
But the larger receivers for Penn State haven't produced as much as the smaller guys.
And whose issue is that? That's a
great question. And you know, it's another new wide receivers coach this year in Taylor Stubblefield, who I think has done an unbelievable job for somebody that took a lot of heat. You know, that wasn't the quote unquote sexy hire. But look, I mean, they still have some guys with decent size on the roster at receiver. And they're recruiting guys like that as well, but they certainly have shifted to like that 6 foot and under group at receiver. And you know, Dotson's 5'11", but he plays much bigger than that. He can go up and high point the ball. Yep. But yeah, I mean, definitely something that is for sure interesting, and we're not really used to that.
Talk a little bit more about the Michigan game here, Tyler. This was a program, and it was said best by the guys at 24/7 who do a great job, Sean Fitz and Tyler Donahue. They said this game was not as much about who was going to win the game, but it was going to have larger overtones for who lost it. The team that lost it was obviously Michigan. Harbaugh in the last year of his contract. James Franklin obviously just inked to the very long and contract extension with the increase in pay. I don't know that this changes anything in terms of what we've talked about in weeks past. I have long been on the block of James Franklin is a great college football coach, a great man to lead your program. And if we want to take a look at coordinators at the end of the year, we can do that. But that the coaching situation to me appears far more stable here at Penn State than at Michigan. Not that that's a high bar. I do feel that this win and perhaps some confidence going into the last 2 regularly scheduled games and then the +1. If you get to 4-5, sneak your way into a bowl game, win that, and then hit the transfer portal hard for a quarterback, I tend to think that a lot of the discussions, yes, people are always going to talk about X's and O's and clock management with James Franklin, but I think some of the I hate to say barbaric takes, but, acts off with his head type of takes may relax a little bit.
They might, and as we have said before, we both agreed that James Franklin's not getting fired. Jim Harbaugh might be getting fired, but it's ultimately, it is funny. Winning cures all, and it feels like they got a monkey off their back for sure. And that's what I'm interested to see is what kind of momentum that they can get here in these next couple of weeks. Now, of course, if you lose to Rutgers, it's like now we're back in the doom and gloom.
Sure.
You got to build on – they have to build on what they just did this week. Obviously, it's not the best Michigan team ever, but there's still plenty of things to build on, obviously, with your first win of the season. And it'll be interesting. People had talked, it looks like he lost the team. It looks like he lost the team. But players' emotions, at least in that game, I know that they were winning and things were going well. I mean, they were into that game. We haven't seen that really until that game. So I don't know if what happened, or maybe it was just the success on the field, but hopefully it carries over. Hopefully, because you really don't want to have to go look for a coach again. I mean, it's a pain with recruiting and then bringing in a whole new staff when this is really the first year with this staff. I mean, there was a lot of turnover on that staff, and maybe it just took them a while to click. But this team has been through a lot, and hopefully, they can save the season here at the end. And I think the momentum going into next year is going to be the big thing. And hopefully, Franklin, sticks it out.
Yeah, and I think there is something to that, Tyler, right? Taking time to click. It's not the entirety of the issue. There are issues at linebacker. There are issues on the offensive line, though the addition of Caeden Wallace, I think, really helps with that. Seeing Juice Scruggs out there was a big deal, and you love to see him
played very well.
Yeah.
Played very well, especially coming off that car accident injury last year. It's actually a miracle that he's out there playing again, and he's playing at a very high level right now.
Agreed.
And to be honest with you, he should be starting at left guard. Now, I don't know if they'll make that switch yet, but, I mean, Juice Scruggs is your likely replacement of Michael Mennett at center for next year and for the foreseeable future.
Agreed. And so that's kind of the point I'm getting at, right, is there are issues across the board. Obviously, there's an issue at quarterback. But, again, think about what got us to this position. And Pat Freiermuth is out for the year. Now, it's a tight end, and I wouldn't say that's a weakness right now, but just take away an elite-level playmaker there, Micah Parsons, obviously.
Right.
The running back room being decimated, and your quarterback regressing. And at some point, you do throw some of that on the coaching staff. But I guess the point is, in a shortened season, without the full complement of spring practices and Kirk Shiraka coming in year one, and then all of the attrition for various reasons over the course of the year, you do get the sense, at least I feel, as if the coaching staff and the program should be afforded an opportunity to flip the page, an opportunity to hit the transfer market hard, get a big-time quarterback to the extent one is out there, and go after it again next year with a crop of players that hopefully will be a year older and more developed. Again, the linebacker position, I keep coming back to that. I think you have a big-time middle linebacker in Jesse Luketa. I think you have a strong, raw, and athletic Lance Dixon that probably at this point isn't quite ready to make all the reads he needs to in the run versus pass coverage. He's more of a pin-your-ears guy. And trust that athleticism. Don't have him making too many decisions out there. But what is the proper balance at that position? I think it's about what the proper balance is, not do you have enough talent. And that's the key, I think, is that, this season has been disappointing and there will be no Big Ten championship or college football playoff. But, and yes, this is a bit of a change of tune after the losses last time, over the course of the season to the win last weekend. But I do believe, and I think we've been consistent in saying, Tyler, that this has been a comedy of errors, a myriad of battling factors that have all hit in one 6-week period for this program to be what was 0-5 coming into this year. And so I think the opportunity is there, and there's reason for Penn State fans to be cautiously optimistic about what comes next.
I agree. And you talk about Lance Dixon. I mean, right there, is a perfect example of what a full spring practice for developmental would have meant for his, for his season and bringing him along, because he has all the tools to be great, just not there yet. And the same goes for offense and a new offensive coordinator. I mean, the list goes on and how, obviously all teams were impacted by this. It's not just Penn State, but they had a lot of tough hits too, obviously with Parsons, Journey Brown. But there are some things I want to see ironed out. I still think that Jesse Luketa being moved to the middle would be a good, because Ellis Brooks, I don't think, is cutting it right now. I don't know. I know you were a bigger fan than I was on him, but I want to continue to see what we saw on offense with the youth movement. And getting these younger guys, Curtis Jacobs, Brandon Smith, Lance Dixon, keep playing these guys. Hakeem Beeman, the defensive tackle, number 51. Judge Culpepper, another reserve defensive tackle. There's just guys that are good players, but we're finally starting to see them, and I think you should keep playing them here down the stretch, because they're going to be key pieces for next year and the year after that.
Yeah, I'll give you my thought on the linebacker position real quick, because you sort of addressed it there. Ellis Brooks at linebacker, middle linebacker, I agree he hasn't been up quite to the standard that he showed in flashes in reserve action, picking up the pieces for Micah Parsons, when he took a few snaps off last year. Over the course of a full game, he's exposed a little bit more. And what I'll say there is, do I think he can play the linebacker position in the middle at the college football level? Yes, I do. Can he do it at the Big Ten? I think he can as well. But at some point, Jesse Luketa is far enough out of position and is causing enough mistakes or missed assignments that if his better position is at middle linebacker, I think Jesse Luketa is a stronger linebacker at that position than Ellis Brooks. And as long as you have the filters and you have the additional depth to come in behind on the outside where Luketa now has to vacate, and that certainly comes in the form of Brandon Jacobs and in Lance Dixon, then I think you have to make that move. And I think Ellis Brooks is a really good backup middle linebacker to come in and see 10, maybe 15 snaps a game to give Jesse Luketa a blow. So that's where I come down on the linebacker position.
Yep, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. So again, a good win for Penn State, no doubt about it. Off the Schneid, as you see behind us there. One quick question, though, right? So before we let everybody off the hook and give them your word, a mulligan year, as we've talked about over the course of the year, the question has to be asked, okay, Lance Dixon didn't have the benefit of the spring, right? And we've talked about that with a couple of guys, and Kirk Sherrock hasn't had a chance to get the offense running. The cynical Penn State fan will say, well, Parker Washington has had no trouble adjusting. So what do you see, if any, as a difference or a reason for why Parker Washington may have been able to adjust so well and the others don't? And or are we just giving excuses where they're not warranted for some of the other guys?
Probably a little bit of both. Wide receiver is one of the easiest transitions from high school to college to jump in and play right away, really, because not much changes. Parker Washington, he came in, as a highly recruited player, but not like a top of the line type of guy. But they really liked what they saw out of him. He runs crisp routes, plays bigger than he really is. Tough kid, perfect slot guy, which is where he's been thriving, obviously, in the offense. And I think, he was one of those guys that was day one ready to play, kind of like Noah Cain was, last year, like just ready to go, has like the business-like approach. And I think that, wide receiver, like I said, is one of the easier positions to break into. And I think he had a great opportunity there with such a wide open room. And he just took advantage of it. And he's going to be a star in no time in the Big Ten.
Certainly a great game for Parker Washington. A real coming out party on an already strong year for him coming in, and he led the way in the receiving corps for Penn State.
Yeah, he certainly did.
Next
Now,
up, though, Tyler, or yeah, you go ahead first.
are you still going to – I just wanted to say you're not jumping to the next game yet, are you?
I might have been, so.
I want to touch on two more things with Penn State, Michigan. One, Penn State has been, quarterback issues throughout this season and all that, but I would argue that they're in a better spot than Michigan is in that position. And I would also say that as a program, I would much rather be in Penn State's corner than in Michigan's corner right now as a program as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing I'll say is I think I fell victim last week when we made our picks. And I'm not saying I made the wrong pick picking Michigan to win the game, but I made it. And one of the comments I made was, hey, looked like Michigan may have found an answer at quarterback and Penn State is still searching for it. And of course, Penn State will still be searching for it potentially until they get a transfer. But think about it with McNamara, and I didn't think about it at the time. What I was saying about McNamara being perhaps their guy and them finding the spark is
Kinda
exactly
like
what we were talking about with Sean Clifford and Will Levis. And I think was on the ball on that one saying, hey, I would not expect Levis to come in and be the guy. He gave you a spark for a half when the other team wasn't preparing. So, again, just wanted to throw that out there. I admit that I missed the ball, I think, when it comes to Michigan and what was happening at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe he just had a rough game, but I think that's a pretty valid point that you probably lump those two, McNamara and Levis. He probably was in that same type of category. Now, I have one more question for you, actually. Do you think this is the last time James Franklin coaches against Jim Harbaugh?
I will say yes. I have seen Michigan move on quickly at times. Now, again, Brady Hoke maybe was there a little longer than he needed to be. Rich Rod was ousted very quickly. Now, he wasn't a Michigan man, so take that for whatever it's worth. But I think there is a possibility that this is it for Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. I think the beginning of the end was the last game of the season on the revenge tour where Ohio State put up 63 on Chase Winovich and Michigan. I think that was kind of the beginning of the end, and it was a so-so year, and here we are now. Then it was after that season. It was so-so year, and now here we are.
Okay.
What do you think?
I mean, I notice how I'd said, is it the last time Jim Harbaugh is going to coach Michigan against Penn State, because I left the James Franklin factor in there too. I would.
What are you saying? Harbaugh goes back to Stanford, and Franklin at USC?
I think Franklin is going to hang around. And with every win here, you're going to get more. Look, again, not that Penn State would fire him, but if he, figures that this is a lost cause type of thing, which I don't think he does, but I was feeling kind of like, that he was probably on his way out a couple weeks ago. But I think that Harbaugh, I feel like that he might eye up that Detroit Lions job. There's going to be obviously some more jobs open in the Jets, and the Lions are the only two that I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there'll be some more, as there always are, but I think he realizes that he's never going to get Michigan to where he had planned to get them. And, recruiting's not an easy thing. Michigan's done pretty well recruiting, but, it might just be time for him to take on another opportunity.
Fair enough. Just a couple minutes before we get you to our guest picker for the evening, but let's talk briefly about the Rutgers game. Clearly a very improved team under Greg Schiano, but Penn State does open as a pretty decent favorite here this weekend. Your thoughts as Penn State travels to Piscataway, New Jersey?
Yes, I was surprised that Penn State was, I think, like a 10-point favorite when it opened. I don't know what it is now. Vegas has actually really liked Penn State this year. They came in as favorites against Iowa, and then didn't, but then when it kicked off, they did, and then same thing against Michigan. But Rutgers, this is a different Rutgers team than we're used to seeing. And credit is all to Greg Schiano and his staff, because it's not like they have new players already. Looking at their schedule here, they played everybody pretty tight. They took Michigan down to the wire. They lost to Illinois by 3. Fought with Ohio State, 20-point loss. Hung with Indiana, beat Michigan State, and just beat Purdue this weekend. They're putting up points, and I don't think I will ever say I think Penn State's going to lose to Rutgers. I don't think they're going to lose to Rutgers this week either, especially after that win. But this is not the typical Rutgers that we're used to seeing the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think they'll certainly give a fight. The week before against Michigan, they certainly did and probably should have won that football game. Greg Schiano has found himself in the oasis of Rutgers football. I mean, that is where he coaches at a high level. It's really tough to argue with that at this point.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that if he can peel out a couple wins a year in the Big Ten at Rutgers, I mean, that's really unbelievable. And I think that they're going to continue to, improve here over the year. Hopefully not too much, because obviously New Jersey's a big battleground recruiting state. But I haven't watched them really play yet, but they're more impressive than they usually are. So I think Penn State, though, after this win against Michigan, there's new confidence. Penn State is by far the more talented team. It's just a matter of doing what they did on Saturday and doing it again to a weaker opponent.
Yeah, and I think your words there ring true to a large portion of the fan base. That fan base hopes that what you're saying is exactly true. Funny game, though. Football can be very interesting, and things can change very quickly. Remember, this was an 0-5 team, and so we go in with cautious optimism for that of the Penn State fans and of this team as they head to Rutgers on Saturday. Tyler, anything else before we take you to our guest picker segment? Dalton Pollvogt is a big-time Notre Dame guy, ND graduate. We'll learn a little bit about his story on the other side. But before we do, anything?
Let's get to it.
All right. We'll be right back on the other side. You're watching the Nittany Lion Sports Report here on Bob Long Sports simulcast on the Small Player Big Play app.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
Welcome back inside the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Time to get a little bit festive here in North Wales as we bring you to the Christmas tree behind us. In fact, we are all in the holiday spirit, are we not? And it's time to bring in Dalton Pollvogt, who is feeling in the holiday and the football spirit as his Notre Dame Fighting Irish are they're in the top 4 solidly in the college football playoff picture. Welcome. Thanks so much for being our guest picker this evening.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, well, let's talk Notre Dame football.
Let's do it.
Boy, what a game against Clemson. A season that saw a 12-7 win over a hapless Louisville team and a 40-plus point output and an overtime win against Clemson. Doesn't seem to jive, but here you sit, undefeated.
Yeah, it's I don't even want to call it a typical Notre Dame season because normally we've lost by now, but you're always waiting for that other shoe to drop, right? It's the Miami game in 17, or the Michigan game in 19, or, it's always something that's about to happen. And so it hasn't happened yet. When Kyle Hamilton got kicked out of the Carolina game, I was pretty damn sure that was what was going to happen. But, I honestly think the difference is the coordinators this year. It's the coaching, it's the adjustments. Clark Lee is one of the smartest football minds in football, in college football at least. I'll go out on a limb and say that. And then I think Tommy Rees is just about he doesn't know any better than to just, call plays that'll catch people off guard. And so it's been a good combo so far. And, Clemson will be tough with Trevor and, all 25 of their defensive starters that weren't playing, according to the Clemson fans. So it'll be good to play them at full strength.
You are as knowledgeable and dialed in of a Notre Dame supporter, I think, of anybody I've ever met. In fact, it kind of reminds me of kind of what we do here, talking Penn State, and the way we go very deep on things. How did that come to be? Of course, a student there, but what drives the love of Notre Dame football as deep as it is for you?
Sure, yeah. So, it's funny. I barely watched college football until I got to college. So, born and raised in St. Louis. So, I suppose we watched Mizzou. I guess that Chase Daniel, Jeremy Macklin lose to Oklahoma twice a year was kind of fun. But before that, I didn't watch any college football. And so, my first ever in-person game was freshman year. Colin Kaepernick, of all people, brought Nevada to Notre Dame and lost, I want to say, 38-0 or somewhere around there. It was a shutout. Michael Floyd had 2 or 3 touchdowns. It was awesome. And you just kind of fall in love with the game day atmosphere like that. And, it's religion in South Bend, all 98% of the students go to all the games, and it's what you look forward to all year. And then, what's really driven it home is I have a family friend whose family's thrown a tailgate every year or every game for the past, I don't know, coming up on 20 years probably. And so, we've kind of created a little tailgate family, if you will. And so, you look forward to getting back to campus to spend time with them. And so that's kind of what's really perpetuated it much beyond graduation is, the football's nice, but you're really going to spend time with family.
Sure. I don't think that we've ever had the opportunity, maybe a long time ago, in the early 2010s, we might have had an opportunity to watch a Notre Dame football game on TV. But in recent years, unfortunately, living where we do, it's more experiencing it via text chains,
Sure.
Watching the game together. And you and Tyler, I know you don't know each other, but you are one and the same in the way you
that's
watch.
Good. I was worried that there weren't many of me out there, but that's good to know that I'm talking to one right now.
But I'm talking a guy off the ledge when his team's about to beat Clemson and he's convinced they're not. Where does that – I'm sure that comes from a lifetime of watching sports, but where does that come from, and how do you handle that when you're watching a game? Because I know there is enjoyment deep down, but it's that sense of impending doom that I think brings so much excitement to it.
It's funny. I guess high level I'd call it an emotional hedge. But I don't – I don't act that way with all my sports teams. So from St. Louis, quick aside, I'm a Cardinals fan, and I go watch a Cardinals game where they're down 9 runs in the 8th, and I'm like, they might figure out a way to tie it. Because I've seen them do it so much, all the devil magic and whatnot. But when the Blues made their cup run, I was figuring out all kinds of weird scenarios and how they were going to blow a 4-goal lead with 3 minutes left. That's where my brain jumped to. And so with Notre Dame, college football, the problem is there's so many teams vying for exactly one title. And when you get up to a certain echelon of college sports, 10-win seasons don't do it for you, right? You need to go beat somebody that is somebody. And so that's
we get that, by the way.
I think there's a lot, there's a hefty tier of teams that are all in that same boat. And until they do that a couple of times, it's hard to just feel comfortable with that. And so, I've just got a history of seeing them get their teeth kicked in by a bunch of teams that were better than them. And so, Clemson was the first big win Notre Dame's had since I've been there. Real big win, right? And so it was just a very new feeling.
That's great. Well, you talked a little bit about the Cardinals, so let's switch gears ever so slightly. I don't know if you still do, but I know you spent a lot of time living in Wrigleyville, which to a St. Louis Cardinal fan is enemy territory, but it was your home. What's that like? I assume you haven't made the jump, of course. That's not the Dalton I know. But what's that like, living in Wrigleyville, and have you softened your stance at all on Cubs fans?
Yes and no. It's funny. So I live less than a mile south of Wrigley right now. I live at Racine and Belmont, for anybody that knows Chicago intersections. It's not very far away from Madison and Clark at all. And so Wrigley's cool. Like it's one of, I mean, that and Fenway are the only two like old ballparks left, right? And so from that perspective, it's awesome that it's built into a neighborhood and all that. But I mean, my fiance and I, she's a huge Indians fan. We have this joke about Cubs fans, and it's like they can't help but cheer. Like anytime a ball leaves the infield on the fly, they cheer like it's a home run. It doesn't matter if it's caught in shallow right, or it doesn't matter if it's caught by like the shortstop. Like any ball that leaves the fly, any ball that leaves the infield on the fly, they think is a home run. And it's just like, do you guys watch baseball? Like, what are we doing here?
They're like Michigan football fans.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, at least most Cubs fans live in Chicago. I mean, you can't say that most Michigan fans went to Michigan.
True.
Well, that's funny. It's a fair and good segue, because you also could have the cynical Penn State or any other fan sitting here watching the show saying, Dalton, come on now. Notre Dame fans also
over the
find themselves from everywhere.
Oh, yeah. It's funny, like whenever somebody calls me out for being a Notre Dame fan, like I get it. Like if I didn't go to Notre Dame, I would hate Notre Dame. But, lucky or unlucky enough as I am, like that's not my lot in life. And so I'll follow Ian Book into the fiery gates of hell. It is what it is at this point. And I mean, I get why people hate Notre Dame, very much so, but I don't know. I guess it's hard to be jealous.
Bob, I have two questions for Dalton, if that's all right. First, who's your defensive coordinator again? Clark Lee?
Clark Lee.
Are you aware that his name has come up for the Vanderbilt head coaching job yet?
I am, and I'm aware that their AD this afternoon said they're looking for an offensive mind, and if that's what they want because they want to sell tickets, have at it.
He's from Nashville apparently and was a walk-on football player for the Commodores. So something definitely to keep your eye on. And then second, we talked about the Clemson game earlier. How do you feel, because Notre Dame should certainly take care of Syracuse and Wake Forest these next 2 weeks, how do you feel Notre Dame should be viewed for the college football playoff if they lose to Clemson the second time around, which, to be honest with you, a lot of people are expecting because of, one, Trevor Lawrence, and two, has Clemson, I doubt that they have ever lost to a team twice because you don't really play the same team twice in college football. But what are your views on that and how the college football committee should view the Irish if that were to happen?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think there's two high-level decision tree splits on that. The first being, if it's a close game, if it goes to overtime again, or it's a touchdown, or, it's 10 points, but, it's a pick six when you're down 3 late or something, I think this should be in. I mean, assuming Bama beats Florida. I don't really want to get into the Florida beats Bama discussion.
Yeah.
There's no right answer there. If Clemson blows out Notre Dame, let them go to the playoff. Let Clemson go to the playoff and let, Notre Dame go play A&M or Florida or, whoever the hell's, else is in one of the New Year's Six bowls. I think that's the best way to go about doing it. I'm not going to get up here and be like an overly homer. But I think if you split with the team and both games are close, I think it's pretty reasonable to say they're probably two of the 4 best teams in the country.
Yeah, well, I'm not a Notre Dame guy, obviously, but I do think that even if they lose to Clemson, which I would probably anticipate happening, they're still a top 4 team to me, unless, of course, Florida beats Alabama, which I don't know if anybody's beaten Alabama right now. But, I just don't – I'd have a hard time leaving Notre Dame out in that situation. And there's really, outside of Florida, like you said, there's really just not much out there this year. So I think Notre Dame's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I like it. And, as nervous of a fan as I get, and Tyler, I'm sure you can feel this way sometimes. I'm trying to just enjoy the ride on this one. None of us can go to any games. It's the strangest season in the world. Like I should just be happy we're having college football. And I'm sure if we lose by a lot of points, I'll tend to feel that way a little more.
That's how Bob and I and the rest of Penn State, we're just happy there's college football.
I don't know if everybody associated with
Yeah,
Penn State
right.
is happy there's football right now, but nonetheless, it's funny point, and we'll get right to the picks here in a second, but you make the point about Alabama, Tyler. Is anybody beating Alabama? It's funny. I told you in the first segment how I felt like my decision-making was flawed, or I didn't see something, right, when it came to McNamara playing quarterback for Michigan. And on Alabama, it's just Mac Jones. I know he's playing so well. I just don't really trust them. And so that's the reason where I'm thinking, somebody's going to beat this Alabama team. But then I think back to 2000, and I forget whether it was 14 or 15, but I think about an Alabama team that had all the talent in the world and the guy by the name of Blake Sims playing quarterback. And I said at that time, it doesn't matter, Blake Sims or whomever, Nick Saban's going to be able to get the job done. Mac Jones obviously playing at a higher level than Sims was, and I still can't quite get there because I know he's played great, but I think in the key moments, I wonder if he's going to be there. I don't really know what I'm getting at. It's kind of circular what I'm talking about, but I'm interested in how you guys see that.
I have just watched Alabama recently, and they just seem to be getting better, even with the injury to Jalen Waddle. Obviously, that was a huge injury, but they still have tons of playmakers with, Smith, John Mechie, Harris running the ball, and their defense is improving too as the season goes on. It's hard to really gauge like Ohio State right now because their games keep getting canceled. And honestly, that's another thing to keep an eye on because they're one canceled game away from not being eligible for the Big Ten championship. I know you're really high on them, Bob, and I think they're probably your favorite, but we've only seen them play 4 times right now, and their next 2 games are pretty much in danger. And what happens if they end right now and just say 4-0, 5-0, don't play for the Big Ten? How does the committee view that? I don't know, but I actually like Alabama. And I still like Clemson a little bit more than Notre Dame right now, just because Trevor Lawrence didn't play. Now, DJ played phenomenal that game. So I think the Trevor Lawrence effect will have a huge impact moving forward with this playoff race.
Yeah, and maybe a better way to put it is not who won that first game, and
Right.
would Trevor Lawrence have played better or worse? Whatever. They were pretty even matched teams that evening.
They were.
Who's going to win the next one? I mean, that's the important thing is who's going to win the next one.
And who knows? Maybe there's a third game too. You never know.
People are worried
That's possible.
Too worried about who won the first one. Let's figure out who's going to win the next one. Or who should have won the first one. Let's just figure out who wins the next one. And with that said, why don't we pick some of the next ones coming up this week? Tyler?
All right. Yep. Here we go. Dalton, you can give us your head-to-head picks. I actually changed the game here. We're going to substitute Tulsa, Navy. I don't know if Bob gave you the list, but we're going to throw in Indiana at Wisconsin instead of that. Give me 1 second here. Sorry. So we'll start off with that game. Indiana at Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think with Penix out, you can have all the inspirational coaching in the world you want, but I gotta ride with the Badgers on that one. With a brand, fresh new quarterback, and as much as I'd love Indiana to win all their games because it's funny, I just don't think they'll pull it out.
Yeah, it would be interesting to have Peyton Ramsey taking over right now if you're Indiana. Obviously, those circumstances are not possible right now, and with Penix out, I agree with Dalton. I got the Badgers this weekend.
Yeah, you hate to see what happened to Penix. I think it's like his second or third year in a row he's had a season-ending injury. Wisconsin clearly is the better team without Penix. With Penix, I think it would have been a very good game, but without him, I have to take the Badgers here. Next, we're going to go to the SEC. Texas A&M traveling to take on the Auburn Tigers.
The Auburn Paper Tigers. You hate to see it. A&M's pretty darn good. They're not as good as Bama, and people want to hold that against them, but truly you should just let them be a pretty darn good football team. And while Auburn's no slouch, they're not A&M, and the Aggies are going to win.
I agree. Texas A&M pretty handily here over a depleted Auburn team, a team that has not lived up to expectation.
Yeah, Auburn looked pretty bad on Saturday, and for that reason, I'm actually going to take them to beat A&M because that just seems like a Gus Malzahn thing. Get crapped on in the Iron Bowl. Bo Nix looked absolutely terrible. Pretty much every reason not to pick Auburn, but I'm going to pick Auburn because I think that Gus Malzahn. It's just how he is and really what he is as a coach. You never know what to expect. So I'm going to take the Tigers there in an upset.
Dalton, that sounds to me like a pick from a guy who's chasing in the Pick'em challenge and needs to catch me.
You have
I respect that.
Yeah,
take your shots where you can.
That's what you have to do, right? Next, actually, College Game Day is heading to Coastal Carolina for the Liberty at Coastal Carolina game. Another marquee game for the Coastal Carolina Bob, how do you say it? Chanticleers?
The Chanticleers, baby.
Yeah, Dustin Johnson. So Liberty, Hugh Freeze takes the Flames down to play the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina.
Bob gave me this list beforehand. I spent more time than I'd care to admit trying to make a Liberty, religion, and sex joke, and I just couldn't put all the pieces together, but I wanted to let everybody know I tried. All that being said, Hugh Freeze is a pretty damn good coach, but I love the vibe the Coastal's got going. Teal turf, they've all got bullets. They know they're pretty darn good. I mean, I'm gonna ride with Coastal.
Yeah, we had a guest picker on here last week from for a lot of different reasons, but a big part of it was because of the Chanticleer magic that's going on. He's a big fan down there. We cannot ride against him. So we're going to go Chants again this weekend over Liberty.
Again, I'm going to go opposite here. I'm going to go Liberty. Hugh Freeze and Liberty actually lost this past week. So I don't know why I like teams that lose a week before. Who did Liberty? They just lost their first loss.
NC State.
2 weeks ago. They responded with a nice win over UMass. But I think the hype of College Game Day and all the hoopla right now around Coastal Carolina, I think it's going to backfire. And I think Liberty squeaks out a close one on the road. And then next we have – I feel like I'm missing South Carolina at Kentucky. Obviously not really a huge matchup, but pretty equal teams with all that being said.
Yeah, first off, I'd just like to say that South Carolina is the real USC. Anybody that tells you different is wrong. Secondly, it's basketball season. Nobody cares about UK football anymore, and that's why they're going to win.
I like it. Also, the real USC knows how to fire a head coach when the time is right, Dalton, and you cannot say that about Southern Cal. So with that said, I am also going to take UK to win this one.
I'm in on this as well. I'm taking the Wildcats here. And then our final non-Penn State game. Sorry, we're not going to get Notre Dame Syracuse. I know it should be a close one. But we're going to go – I guess it's out to what is that, Bob? The WAC or the Mountain West? We're going to go Fresno State at Nevada.
Mountain West.
Mountain West, yeah. So we're going to go out to Mountain West. Fresno State travels to Nevada. If you're looking for something to do, 10:30 Saturday night, FS1. Should be an entertaining matchup.
I can already tell you I'm not going to know the spread of this game until the night games are about halfway over and I know if I need to chase or not. And with that being said, I think I'm going to go with Fresno. I don't know much about either of these teams. Screw it.
7.5 favorites right now, Nevada. So if you're going Fresno, the money's there for you.
Perfect.
Go ahead and get it.
I'll take Nevada. Again, this is a bit of a random game, but I appreciate you throwing it in here, Tyler. But I'm going to go with the Wolf Pack. We're a three-man Wolf Pack right here, just like other great three-man Wolf Packs of the past. So we're going to go with Nevada.
It was tough to pick some of the games this week, and then we've also had the games that have been canceled, like literally the day after we record, and it's like whatever. But I'm going Nevada too. I don't know. I guess just being favorites and only having one loss on the season. Again, last week to Hawaii. I'm going to take Nevada, and that leaves us with our last game, which is Penn State versus Rutgers. 1-5 Penn State coming off the Michigan win takes on 2-4 Rutgers coming off of a win against Purdue. As of right now, last time I checked, at least Penn State was 10-point favorites. Dalton, give us your winner and a score.
All right. Can I ask a question first? I saw a tweet on Saturday afternoon, evening that said, talk to your kids about 2-win Rutgers. And I know it was against for what and not. And, is Rutgers okay? Like, normally they're bad. Are they okay this year?
Greg Schiano magic.
Yeah, I mean,
Piscataway.
that's the crazy thing is they could still end up with 2 wins, but within 8 or 9 games, that's a really good season for Rutgers.
Yeah. All Big Ten.
and they're all conference games, right? Yeah.
I like Penn State to cover the 10 here. They have more talent. They're better. I understand. Record books aside, I mean, this is Philly versus New York, guys. Like, we got to figure this out. I mean, isn't that how the Big Ten phrases all their markets?
Have you seen the commercials?
Prediction, 35-21.
Okay. I like it. I'm going to go with a push here. I don't know if that helps for if I have to pick a pick 'em, I'm going to say Penn State by 9. But I think there's a strong chance this ends up somewhere right around a 10-point football game. If forced, and if I'm going to get dinged for the push, I'll take Penn State 34, Rutgers 26. How about that?
All right, so you do have Rutgers covering. Yeah, I thought 10 points was pretty high, being that was Penn State's first win and the first time they looked decent really all year. But I'm going to pick them to cover barely. I'll say 31-20 Penn State. I think they just have too much talent. Yes, Greg Schiano is having a great year at Rutgers, but the confidence after Penn State taking care of, not a very good Michigan team, but I think that confidence carries over to this week, and they play well again and get the win.
All right, so before we let Dalton go, I know we're not picking Notre Dame, Syracuse, but how much do they win by?
It'll be interesting only because I think that high level, I think Dabo's going to bitch and they're not going to have to play. Clemson's not going to have to play the Florida State game, which means that Kelly's going to go to the ACC and say, there's no way in hell we're playing Wake. And so let's assume both those teams have December 12th off. They get the bye week before December 19th, what have you. I think Kelly's got everybody out of there after a couple series in the third quarter, which means Notre Dame probably gets up by 28 somewhere in the third, and then it closes around, 18. Notre Dame by 18
Really?
final score.
Wow. Okay.
Against Syracuse?
Yeah, I think they're going to get up. They're going to pull everybody out, and then Syracuse is just going to somehow meander their way into.
Right now they're like 34-point favorites.
Yeah, they're not going to cover that.
No, yeah, I don't. That's
Nobody bet that. Like, I don't bet Notre Dame because I can never get my head clear enough to figure it out. But
that's good stuff. Well, hey, Dalton, a lot of fun having you. Enjoyed you coming on and providing some context on St. Louis Cardinal baseball, St. Louis Blues hockey, Notre Dame football, and everything in between. And a shout out to 2013 PNCICT, by the way.
Amen.
Tyler, thanks for your time as well. Boys, enjoy the football as always. We'll catch everybody soon here on the Nittany Lion Sports Report.